My name is Rituparna Chakraborty, but I'd prefer if you call me Ritu, because I know that's quite a mouthful of a name to have. I'm kind of a fossil in TeamLease. And what I do dabble in a lot of stuff within the organization, but my primary responsibility is for the general staffing business of TeamLease. Okay, so part of the founding team. I've been around since the time the company has been started. And what else do I tell about myself? I think I'm kind of a startup specialist. Whenever anyone's trying to start anything anywhere, somehow I figure in the scheme of things. I was campus recruited by Manish from Goa Institute of Management, so when he was starting India Life. And subsequently I did leave India Life and joined a few friends who were starting a .com. How many of you have heard about the .com regime in India? .com regime? It was a big thing. It was probably one of the first wave of revolution of technology within the country those days, and how we got acquainted to the world of internet. And while the .com went bust, I learned a lot about the world of the World Wide Web through that experience. Monster was coming into India, and I was their first recruit for Monster in India. I was hired from their Boston office. That was on account of the World Wide Web. Otherwise, they wouldn't have known that I existed, I guess. So then I think the idea of TeamLease was being thought of, and that's why I came back probably to TeamLease. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but yeah, I think this is going to be my 16th year in TeamLease. Yeah, something like that. Okay, now I think it's very important. What do you think is India's biggest challenge? What's India's biggest challenge? Speak up. Is unemployment the biggest problem, or it's a consequence? Or it is because of something else? Again, these are all symptoms, but what's the biggest problem? Why is that a problem when the entire world believes that's India's biggest advantage? Again, because of what? What does that lead to? Okay. So what? Okay. So you said that word. India's biggest problem is poverty. Okay. So especially when we go to some of these developed countries for conferences, and when I go and look at the people out there, if any one of you have gone abroad in some of these cities, you will sometimes question that these guys are definitely not smarter than us. Why are they richer than us? And they are not. If you look at the outcomes, the academic outcomes in most of these developed countries, I mean, nothing extraordinary, right? So I think we at TeamLease, we've decided that we will make use of India's biggest challenge today, and we make it our opportunity, which is that what is it that we can do to kind of reduce India's poverty? Okay, so essentially if we were to understand what really leads to poverty and what is it that as a company we can do, our conclusion is that we can definitely reduce poverty by innovating right at the intersection of the 3 E's, which is employment, employability, and education. Honestly, the solution lies right at the center of the convergence point of all these 3 things. Now, we don't know whether we will solve India's poverty problem or not, but we definitely die trying. And that led to our vision of, what is it? What's our vision? Exactly. So that's led to our vision of putting India to work. And when we talk about work, we're just not talking about any work. We're talking about a formal work, a work of dignity. Okay, it's not just about any work, because we all know in India, anybody who needs a job has a job. What they don't have is a job or a wage that they aspire for, or a job paying a salary which they aspire for. That's essentially India's problem. So India's problem around low productivity is a bigger problem than just a job problem. Okay? So, and that has become a problem on account of 5 labor market transitions becoming dysfunctional or not happening. And what are those 5 labor market transitions? So essentially, farm to non-farm. More than 350 million people in India, out of the entire workforce of about 490 million people, they work in the farm sector, right? The agricultural sector. Now, that should, is that a bug or a feature? That with India has 350 million people in agriculture. Is that a bug or a feature? Is that talking about India's supremacy in agriculture? No, it is not. It is a bug. The thing is that I'll just give you an instance. India is actually the largest food grain manufacturer in the world. Great, right? United States comes a close second. Okay? And barely a thin margin between US and India. But India has been able to do that with over 10 million people. US has been able to do that with just 100,000 people. So what does it tell you? That agriculture in India suffers from acute levels of low productivity. Because people in villages or far-flung places don't have alternative options, they hang around in the farms. Which means we have not been able to provide any alternatives, and hence they think that they are doing something in the farms, but they are really not. Now, if we were to move them away from the farms into some other opportunity, what is that likely to be, by the way? What could be, given the skill set that these people possess? What's the inherent skill set, by the way, of people working in the farms? So what's the skill?
Unskilled.
Still, what they have some skill. What is that skill?
Physical.
Exactly. So they have physical skill, which is physical strength, right? And if that is a skill that they possess, which is the industry where naturally they can transition into? If not the farms, what could be the alternate industry that they can move into? Correct?
Manufacturing.
Exactly. So they can move into manufacturing. Have you seen old Hindi movies where Amitabh Bachchan used to be the union leader? So the farmers who would leave their villages and go where to work? Exactly. But that got limited to the movies only. In reality, that hasn't happened. And if you remember those movies, you will see the factories are in the outskirts of the villages. Which means it is something which was easily accessible, supposedly. They could just walk to it, cycle to it, use their bullock carts and go for it, right? But in reality, most of India have not got impacted by it. Manufacturing's contribution to the Indian's economy from a GDP perspective is less than 12%. From an employment perspective, it is less than 12%, which means manufacturing, which should have been the natural go-to spot for these kids who are in the farms, or these youth who are in the farms, have not got activated, right? And that is why Mr. Modi's campaign on making India becomes so much relevant for us as a country, right? In the latest budget speech, okay, imports became more expensive. Have you tried to understand what's the consequence of something like this have on something like transition that I'm talking about? Imports have become expensive, which means all those fancy cosmetics which we used to buy have become more expensive. Smartphones, which were manufactured, which were coming in from outside of India, have become more expensive. What's the consequence of something like this? And why was this done?
So only because it has been product and re-incentivize, make it as a deterrent so that it becomes expensive.
It's very simple. So that whatever it is, if you want to sell in India, you have to make in India. It's very simple. So I don't know, some of you must have heard about the fact Samsung set up its largest manufacturing plant in India recently, in Noida. Right? Apple has started manufacturing iPhones in India. Foxconn has already got 2 active plants in India. Okay, Flex has an active plant going on in India. But all of this, of course, is the scratch on the surface. All of this is not sufficient. We, of course, need more. But I'm trying to explain to you the consequence of Make in India and why it's important. More and more manufacturing has to happen in India because the general availability of manpower and the skills that they possess, we have to enable the transition of these people moving from farm to non-farm, and that is manufacturing. Aspiring that these people can be moved to services, which has been guiding the course for us when it came to job creation, it's not possible, right? Can you move these kids from the farms, from that ecosystem, and move them to a job in the services sector? It can be, theoretically, but it's practically the time that it will take to make that transition is going to be quite humongous, right? And hence, practical thinking suggests that manufacturing has to be activated. And the kind of volumes now. One is a skill argument, the second is the volume argument. The kind of manpower or workforce that are getting created every day, every month in this country. We need jobs which are voluminous in number. And manufacturing is the only sector which has the potential to create jobs in hordes, in masses. No matter what you do, services sector cannot ever create those many jobs. Okay? So Make in India, that's why it becomes an extremely relevant aspect of how this transition can be made possible. Rural to urban. You know, India has about 6 lakh villages in this country, and out of which 4 lakh villages have less than 200 people. Now, if it is a village with just 200 people, how many jobs can it possibly attract? I mean, it's not a conducive market. Even a dabbawala won't go and give dabbas in a community with just 200 as a marketplace, right? So hence, what do these people do in these villages? What do these villages do?
Right around and discuss everything about the world except
No, I mean, finally, they need jobs, right? So, yes. So they leave the villages and then they start moving to nearby towns, cities, or even some of them not nearby. Some of them are traveling from Bihar to Kerala as well. Do you know that in Kerala, right now, every other shop signboard, along with Malayalam, there is another language in which the hoardings read. It's Hindi. Can you imagine Malayalam that happening? It has already started because the largest migrant population in Kerala today is from Bihar. The largest. So I'm pretty sure that वहाँ पे कहीं पे वो क्या बोलते हैं वो लिट्टी चोखा भी मिलता होगा, I guess, somewhere in Kerala these days. But yeah, I myself have visited Kerala often and I have seen so many outlets today trying to cater. Of course, these are not the top end restaurants, but there are these chota outlets which have started cropping up because people in Kerala are no more in Kerala, right? Where are they? Yes. But there are work which needs to get done, and this is how migration, by the way, gets started. But you know, finally, everybody cannot migrate, right? Everybody cannot get used to the cultural difference. So I remember there is a customer of ours in Goa who wanted about 700, it's an electrical company, 700 electricians who also need to climb poles. Okay? Now, of course, in the entire western region, we couldn't find those many people, electricians who can do that job. So we actually went to UP and Bihar, and our folks mobilized these people and packed them in trains and sent them off to Goa. We landed as well in Goa, and within about 2-3 months, we had not a single resource left. All of them had gone back because they couldn't get used to the culture, they could not get used to the food, they could not get used to the language, the weather. The list is long, and hence it's easier said than done. So why till so far we have been bringing people to jobs, in the long run, it is not feasible. You cannot continuously depend on, rely on this process where you are just bringing people to the jobs. I was just discussing a while back with you, right? That it is in none of the cities, she was talking about that you guys should leave Bombay for a while thanks to the traffic. It has become so bad. The point is that whether it's Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, Hyderabad, you name a city, it's no better. Everyone is having the same problem. So it's too crowded, city is too crowded. The roads are congested. Infrastructure is in shambles. But that's exactly what happens, right? I don't think a Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore has the capacity to take in any more people anymore. Why Delhi, Bombay? I think you talk about all the bigger cities, it's the same challenge. Like, I feel embarrassed to live in Bangalore because I know every Bangalorean hates us. Because they feel that because of so many people who are coming from outside of Bangalore, they have lost. Bangalore is losing its plot, right? But then what do? Bangalore is attracting all the jobs, and hence you will end up attracting all the talent. Because those jobs are not going anywhere else. And if the jobs move, by the way, people will move along with the jobs. But in a country like India, where 1 million people are getting added to the workforce every month, and that's how it's going to be for the next 20 years, this solution can't be a long-lasting solution. And hence, India needs rapid urbanization, which means we right now have got about 50 cities with over 1 million population, while China has 350. We need more cities in this country. And hence, again, you must have heard about Mr. Modi's campaign on smart cities and why we need 100 smart cities. We do. This is exactly the reason why we need more smart cities. We need digitally connected cities which has access to 24/7, power, water, good roads, ports, airports. It's exactly because of this reason that we have to have many, many more cities than what we have been able to create so far, so that we are able to take jobs to people rather than rely on bringing people to jobs, because that model is not working. Okay? 90% of India's workforce are in the informal sector. Now, we are, the people in the room, we are all part of the elite 10%, by the way. Now, I remember, every time I again go to any international conference on labor laws, and I talk about this figure of 90% of India's workforce being informal, they usually think that I have made an error. That I meant to say that 90% is formal and 10% informal, but it's actually, the reality is exactly the opposite. Yeah, I know it. People find it astonishing that we are supposed to be one of the fastest growing economies in the world. We are supposed to be an economic superpower very soon. But yet 90% of our workforce are in the informal sector. Okay? And what does this mean? What does the word informal mean? The word informal means that they do not have a structured appointment letter. they do not have any labor law entitlements or benefits, which means that they're not covered under minimum wages, they have no coverage under social security, they have no coverage under any kind of health insurance protection. So which means 90% of India is involved in indignified work and could be precarious as well, with no protection. Okay? And that has happened largely on account of our archaic labor laws. You know, India has every labor law that you can think of across the world to protect the interest of the workforce. So again, I mean, I represented the employers of India ILO has this Geneva Convention on Private Employment Agencies. And if you guys are familiar with the United Nations structure, so any conventions or any such needs that they have this huge mammoth hall where there will be this section which is on the left-hand side, the employers of the world represent. The center would be represented by the governments of different countries, and the extreme right would be the employee representatives, which essentially are the trade union leaders of different countries. Okay? So, and I was hearing through the events about the different concerns that were being raised by the employees' representations from different countries. And I was making a note that each and everything that they were saying that we need protection or we need regulation for, India already had a law for it. And a very detailed law for it. So there was not one single instant which they could pick up. They were discussing. Essentially, they were saying we need regulation for this, we need regulation. India already had regulations for everything that we were saying. You know, still, interestingly, there is an OECD data which suggests that India is one of the most regulated markets in the world when it comes to labor laws, yet least protective of employees or the labor. That speaks for itself. Essentially, our labor laws are such that it focuses around job preservation rather than job creation. Which means our labor laws have been written to kind of protect the interest of the minority, which is the 10% who's already got a chance to get into the labor market. And is actually preventive and prohibitive for the others who are outside to come into it. I'll give you simple examples of it. If your salary is 15,000 or even 10,000 rupees, for example, 45% of the cost to company, let's say cost to company is 10,000, almost 45% gets confiscated in the name of some mandatory statutory deduction or the other. Okay? While if your salary is 50,000 rupees, those mandatory deductions reduces to about 8%. Now that is regressive, which means the lower my salary is, my incentive to stay in the informal sector increases, which means that my driver, if tomorrow I decide that I'm going to make you a formal employee of mine, and I'll give you an offer letter, he'll run away. Because suddenly his cost to company, so-called, of 20,000 rupees a month will get reduced, right, significantly. He will get only half, approximately a little more than half of that amount. And that's why, because of our labor laws, actually it's not employers. A person who wants to enter the workforce, they make a decision against getting into the formal sector. Which means they choose to be in the informal sector because they don't have. So essentially here is the argument between the huge gap between haath wali tanha and chitti wali tanha. So it is so large and it is so wide, especially for someone who's attempting to get into the workforce, that they said, chalo jaane do, not interested because it's not effective for me. And I can take you through many such instances in our labor laws which actually encourages informality in this country. However, two non-labor reform incidents happened in the last year or so, which actually has helped the formalization process. Can you guys guess which are those two incidents? to mammoth. I think the entire country has been talking about it. I don't think there has been any family in this country who's not discussed about these two things. Sorry? The Notebandi, which is demonetized. Okay. Anything else that happened? GST. Exactly. So these two things, and now you might wonder how. I'm sure all of you have been party to massive debates around this. People who believe that it was a great idea, people who believe it was a crappy idea. Right? I think let's just look at the underlying practicality of it. Why was demonetization done and what was its impact on formalization? Thing is that suddenly the society was prompted to become cashless because of demonetization, right? So all these people who are in the informal sector, how were they getting paid? One of the biggest, how are they getting paid? Cash. Which means because of the option of the prevalence of cash, or because we were not so much of a cashless society, people could get away by paying these people through cash, right? Now, of course, the moment this whole incident happened, did it impact lives? Of course it did. It actually, a lot of the people, and whose life it impacted, it didn't impact anyone in the formal sector. It impacted those in the informal sector. And a lot of people who were employed through informal ways and means definitely got impacted, and they were rato-rat rendered jobless. Okay? Because a lot of the business who were running using them, they just didn't have an option. And hence, they were sent back home. And I know myself firsthand that so many people had to leave the cities and they went back home because their employers were not able to pay them. And this particularly happened in few sectors which uses a large number of informal sector. It happened in construction, it happened in infra, it happened in retail, some segments, it happened in gems and jewelry. So essentially the sectors which have large number of informal sector got impacted by it. And yes, some jobs also, informal jobs. But then these businesses who were using these informal employees and making fat margins, after a while realized that if I have to survive, right? Which means I'll have to survive by compromising to some extent on my margins. Which means so far I was trying to pay people out through cash and I was maximizing my gains. Some of them will try and regularize, which means that they will also formalize themselves. They will go and get themselves a GST number. I'll come to GST a little later, but they will say, okay, let me try and make these transactions through bank accounts. Let me pay them through bank accounts. And if you're going to pay them to bank accounts, by the way, they are forced to then ensure that, because then they will show up as headcount. You're making salary payments through bank accounts, and hence they'll be forced to pay them PF, they'll be forced to pay them ESIC. That's how the formalization process gets started. And then happen GST. Okay? So, of course, there is always a service tax regime. But what was the difference between service tax and GST? Is the responsibility of the vendor paying the GST now shifted to the parent company, which is availing of the services. Earlier, when, let's say, a vendor came to us and raised a bill, a consolidated inclusive of service tax, the moment we pay that amount, for all practical purposes, I've paid service tax to the vendor against the bill, and hence I'm protected. And hence, when I am charging my customers service tax, okay, I can offset this amount that I paid to my vendor with it, just because I've released the payment to the vendor. But with the GST regime, that is not possible. I can myself claim credit, input credit, only if I ensure by checking the GST portal that my vendor has remitted the GST amount that I have paid to them. Which means earlier, when a lot of business could flourish on the basis of even playing around with the service tax component. Today you can't. Now the level of transparency that the entire GST ecosystem has brought in, that there is very little room for people to hide. I'll give you an example. So India has about 63 million enterprises. Okay, until pre-GST, only 9 lakh were registered. 63 million enterprises are there, but only 9 lakh registered. But thanks to GST, that number today stands at 1.3 million people. 3 million companies who are registered under GST, and it's growing day by day. While the difference is still large between 1.3 million and 63 million, our belief is that the 63 million is a wrong figure. That 63 million definitely needs to come down, but the 1.3 million has to go up. Okay? So, out of 1.3, there are 1.3 million GST users. If I go by Naukri, 45,000 of them are posting jobs on any given day, and only 15,000 apparently does so on a regular basis. And there are about 14 to 16,000 companies with paid up capital over 10 crores. Which means that for India, if you have to have more formal jobs, you need to have more formal employers, right? We can't be talking. That's why I get very, I get amused when hearing some of these debates which keep happening on national channels, on all these media channels, where people are hammering the government that jobs chahiye, ye formal nahi hai, ye theek nahi hai. But the point is that you cannot overnight create formal jobs if you have not created the ecosystem to have enough formal employers. And it's known fact that India is a hostile habitat for entrepreneurs. Anybody who wants to formalize or who wants to become bigger and grow and scale, there are challenges which show up. Okay? Which means that the ecosystem is such that it doesn't encourage formality. But anyway, I'm sure there's work in progress, and that's the reason this GST and the demonetization, while it's not labor reform, are two reform, which has really pushed the agenda of formalization forward. Okay? Subsistence, self-employment to decent wage employment. So, for the longest time, I think in India, we have patted ourselves on the back, saying 50% of Indians or 50% of our workforce are self-employed, and that must be a signal of our entrepreneurial genius. No. Poor people, they cannot afford to be jobless, they cannot afford to be unemployed, and hence they are self-employed. But that doesn't mean that they have a decent wage employment. I'll give you an example. 58% of our graduates in this country earn less than 6,500 rupees. That's a signal of how bad the problem is. That is acute subsistence wage employment, which means there is a dissonance between your so-called qualification and degree, or what the indicator should be, and what actually comes to people's hand. I think that's where we keep saying that India doesn't really have a job problem. India definitely has a productivity problem. So India's problem is that while people have jobs, people don't have the jobs which pay for the wages that they aspire for. And this is exactly that problem. And that's where I think organizations like School Guru comes into the picture. Skilling India, that's why becomes so much essential. And skilling India at scale. India's biggest problem today is low productivity. And until and unless we solve that problem at scale, we will never be able to get out of this problem, where you will see more and more graduates coming out and settling or ending up in jobs which pay much, much lower than what they probably ought to get to. Okay? And that's why even again, the new government's campaign on Skilling India becomes so much relevant. So I'm particularly personally a little disappointed by the last budget, where I felt that while there has been some impetus given to higher education, again there has been a dilution of focus around vocational skilling and education, because that's imperative. At this point of time, no matter what you try, jitna bhi haath pair maar do, until and unless we do not have more and more skilled youth in this country, I don't think we'll be able to solve the last problem. Okay? School to work. About 80% of our school enrollments, essentially people who enroll into the kids, drop out by the time they reach class 10. Okay? And if you drop out, and of course if I look at a broader picture, about 165 lakh kids take the class 10th exam. Out of the 165 lakh, only 30 lakh kids end up going to a college. Across passing 10, then going to 12th, and then passing 12th, and then going to college. So that's the kind of, now, people who drop out at every level, India doesn't have a mechanism by which you can gainfully bring them back into the workforce. There are no legitimate, formal livelihood options or alternatives being available. You've dropped out, great. And that's not the only challenge. I've dropped out because I could have dropped out for many reasons. I'll give you an incident. So there's this CNBC journalist who comes to our office very often. And he's a cameraman. For many of these shows that we end up doing. So, and I know this guy because he's come to our office quite a number of times. So I was doing this show with CNBC, which is about careers and jobs and all. So the anchor asked the last question, which is, what's your feedback or what's your message to the youth? How can they find themselves a job? So I said, listen, if you are articulate in your communication skills, of course you need to be very strong in your local language, but English would be a huge advantage. If you have a smartphone, if you have an Aadhaar card, and preferably if you have a two-wheeler, nobody can stop you from getting a job today. And it's a fact. Like, as I stand in front of you, I have 30,000 jobs which I can't fulfill. I can if they meet these criteria. So the show finished, and then this guy was wrapping up, the cameraman. So suddenly while wrapping up, he said, "Madam, I have a question for you." So I said, "Yes, please, what's it?" So what does an illiterate do? What should an illiterate do? So I was a little confused because after a long time I heard the word illiterate in my scheme of things. So I said, "What do you mean by illiterate?" He said, "For example, myself." I was really shocked. He is one of the most professional cameramans around in the Bangalore circuit, right? And he considers himself illiterate. So I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not able to add it all up. How are you illiterate?" He said, "Actually, madam, I'm an 8th pass dropout." Okay? I said, "But you are such a skilled cameraman." He said, "Yes, ma'am, but you know my problem. I have been trying to apply to quite a few formal courses, but I cannot." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because everywhere they want my 10th board certificate." And that's exactly when I started telling them about our agenda through NALSOC, about the BBO courses that we are running, about how we are trying to come up with basic assessments of such people to kind of qualify them to get into the formal academic and the formal skilling process. Okay? So I think at this point of time, of course, I'm not even getting into the awareness piece of this whole thing. I don't think we have an ecosystem which is trying to get these people back who might have dropped out for many reasons. It could be family issues, it could be financial reasons, into the formal ecosystem. At this point of time, nobody is thinking about it. And hence what happens is, by design, such people are relegated to the informal sector. So that is the reason 9 out of 10 kids who are entering the workforce every day, every month, will end up getting into the informal sector because of these basic hurdles that they face day to day. Okay? Now, for all of you, understanding this slide is very important because then you will start equating everything that we do as a company, as TeamLease. And you will see us being the loudest advocate around changes around these things. All our public policy, communication, is essentially trying to tackle one of these things. Actually, I am introducing a sixth element, so maybe when I come back, I will tell you the last one would be on gender, which is gender inclusivity. And how do we get more women back into the workplace? That is my sixth element. So I am working on the theme, on the communication. But essentially, this is our life's work. If we can solve this, if we can make these transitions possible or influence these transitions, we will definitely be putting India to work and getting them out of poverty. Okay? So internalizing this is very important for all of you. So essentially, step back on TeamLease. I don't know how many of you know, but we've actually hired someone every 5 minutes since our inception. Okay? Sounds remarkable, right? But that just represents 5% of the kids who walked into any of our offices or have applied to us for a job or written to us or whatever you might talk about. Whichever way they've tried to get a job through us. Just 5%. So I think for us at TeamLease, we do have a real-time view of the agony and ecstasy of India's labor market. So on one hand, I have employers. I was just telling you that I have at this point of time how many jobs? 30,000 jobs. I mean, Shantanu is aware we spent a lot of time in the offsite trying to discuss about what do. You have so much demand. And demand is the way it is. You cannot influence the demand because demand is God. That demand is representative of what employers want today. Okay? But my reality is only 5% of the kids get hired. I have employers who in one breath, all of them are saying the same thing. That get me the right person at the right time, but I can't because they can't find talent. And on the other hand, every day when I leave office, I see so many droopy shoulders walk out of our offices because they are not getting a job. Okay? So, essentially when we reflect back upon all of this, about why all of this is happening, we realize that in India, kids need to make two very important decisions while they are in their mother's womb, even before they are born. And what are those, do you think? Those two decisions? I think, yeah, mother's womb. So mother's womb se bahar aake bhi they can take. Before they are born, essentially, they have to make these decisions. Pardon? Competition. Again, these are decisions you can make after you're born as well.
Skill is something. Why a girl?
I think the most important decision, two decisions, and those in that order would be the parents they are born into. And second is the pin code they choose to be born into. Yeah, think about it.
Yeah.
How many people in this room are from Bombay? Okay. How many people belong to a non-city in this room? Like I belong to a non-city. So essentially, people who are born in the places like Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, inherently are at an advantage over those who are born in a Barmed, Jhunjhunu, Tikala, Durgapur. Yeah. And the second is the parents bit, which is very important. Look, I might have got one of those decisions wrong. But what probably helped me is that I got one decision of the parents right. I mean, my parents, look, all our decisions, there's no such thing called getting parents wrong. But what I meant was that who your parents are, essentially. Yes. I think I was able to tackle the second deficiency because I had parents who had an approach, who had an awareness, who had resources, which helped me tackle the second part. But The reality is that anyone who gets these two right, by default, they could be absolute gadhas in IQ, are at an advantage. And that creates inequality, which is unfair, which is the reason that you see so much economic disparity across the country. Why is it that certain states seem more affluent than some other states? Why is it that some locations have all the money and while others don't have? Why is the gap so huge? Okay? I think as a country, we need to really negate the impact of these two. I feel what makes us different from some of the developed countries are these two things. That in those countries, this doesn't matter. But in a country like India, these two decisions hugely matter. So, how many of you have heard about India Life? I'm saying, if you guys are getting tired, do sit down. I'm telling you, this is going to take longer. India Life, how many of you have heard about India Life? Okay. So, essentially, when Manish and Ashok, so let me tell you a little bit about this story. Manish was coming back from Wharton. All of you know who's Manish Savarma? Anybody who doesn't know, you put your hand up. Does everyone know who's Manish Savarwal? If you don't, please put up your hand because I'll tell you about it. Okay. So Manish Savarwal is our executive chairman. Okay? And the rest you can Google it. No, I mean, well, maybe the reason I'm saying so, that the rest you can Google it, is because there's so much to talk about. Okay? So, Manish, how do I put it? Manish is probably one of the most respected names in the world of jobs and skills in India today. He is one of the most respected private sector representatives, respected by the government and trusted by the government. Somebody who works very closely with the government in terms of various issues which impact the country. He also happens to be the government nominee as a director in the Reserve Bank of India. Well, what else? I mean, his resume, I can go on, but that's why I'm saying, just Google it. You'll know who's Manish Savarwal, but he is our executive chairman. And Ashok Reddy, who knows, do you guys know Ashok? Ashok Reddy? Okay, Ashok Reddy is our managing director and CEO of TeamLease. And the women must know Ashok. Anyway, Ashok is, again, he is one of our co-founders, and you can say he's the foundation of TeamLease in many ways. Of course, both of them are, but while Manish plays the role of being the visionary, Ashok is the anchor. Okay? So, again, Google him, especially the images. But anyway, I think Ashok, Manish, both of them were at a certain juncture in their lives. Manish was coming back from Wharton after doing his MBA. Ashok, my God, all of this is getting recorded. Oh God.
Slide 2.
But please restrict it. Kill me for it. Anyway, so yeah, I think Manish was coming back from Wharton. Ashok had done his MBA from IIM Bangalore. He was with ICICI Securities, but he was hating what he was doing. Mohit was coming back from Sydney having done his MBA. So Mohit Gupta is actually our third promoter. Besides Manish and Ashok, Mohit was the third promoter. You guys haven't met Mohit because he has now exited the company, but Mohit is the other co-founder. And the three of them essentially were trying to set up, their idea was to set up an insurance company. That I'm talking about is around the year 1996. Yeah, 1996, 97, around that time. And it wasn't easy. You can't just get up one day and say, okay, let me set up an insurance company, and hence they decided that, okay, let's set up a benefits administration and payroll processing company. Benefits administration is things like PF, superannuation, gratuities to the people who manage these trusts, people who manage the investments of these trusts. And payroll processing is pure and simple payroll processing for companies. Okay? So I think we set up India Life, and we were the first, you can say, professionally managed company those days in this particular space and with a national presence. We scaled up that business, but to some extent, and eventually that business was sold off to Hewitt Outsourcing, and then Hewitt sold it off to Excelity. So right now the current business of Excelity is what the India Life business was for payroll processing and benefits administration. But the reason we always refer to the India Life heritage is because we learned a lot from this stint. Okay, we had made a lot of mistakes during the India Life stint, which we ensured that we don't make in TeamLease. For example, in India Life, we focused on sales and sales alone. We felt that if you get sales right, everything else follows. And hence, at some level, we felt we marginalized the importance of building a robust operations engine. So in India, in TeamLease, we made sure that we maintained that balance. We had outsourced technology in India Life. In TeamLease, we ensured that technology is being done in-house rather than it being outsourced. And finally, we also developed an understanding about the key rules of entrepreneurship, of identifying what is a dwarf and what is a baby. Both are small. The only difference is, what's the difference between a dwarf and a baby? Huh? Age, no. What is the difference? Both small. So what's the difference?
Baby will grow.
Exactly. The babies grow, the dwarf won't grow. So I think one of the important lessons of entrepreneurship we learned through India Life, and that was, but most importantly, India Life created a foundation of our awareness and knowledge about the payroll ecosystem and the labor law ecosystem. So if we are what we are, if we have been able to build credibility across the length and breadth of the country around being experts in labor laws or understanding, is something which started with India Life, essentially. So it's something which has been there since the 1990s, and that's the kind of awareness and knowledge we've accumulated over the years to be able to create TeamLease, or the platform to TeamLease what it is today. Now, coming back to TeamLease, what's our vision? So I think the vision is very clear to us that all of us now, even when we are integrating some of our acquisitions, for example, the acquisition of School Guru and all the rest, it actually aligns with our vision of putting India to work. And any of the acquisitions or of companies, businesses, adjacencies that you will see us doing, it will always align with our vision of putting India to work. At this point in time, let me share with you a little bit more. Like for us, TeamLease is it's not just a company anymore, it is a cause. Like, I'll be very honest, what brings me to work every day in TeamLease is no more anything else. It's just the fact that we're doing much more than just a job here. We are changing lives, we're creating opening balance for today's youth, we are bending the curve in their favor. That's what we do. The fact that we are able to ensure that our associates get paid on time, because they make modest money. They make 12,000, 13,000. Their monthly ration, schools, children's fees, monthly rent depends on us. Okay. So I think for us, it is a little much more beyond than just meeting our daily needs. Our own needs. It is actually far more overarching, and that's what helps us come to work. So I was telling Shantanu a while back that I've actually started coming to work at 8 o'clock. And trust me, if the need is so arises, and if I feel within that I should come to work at 7, I might just end up coming. Because I do look forward to come to work. And we do look forward to coming to work is just because of this. That what we are doing, it does impact life. I do believe we are game changers. Okay? And for us, TeamLease is never going to be a family business. So none of the promoters' children, none of our children will ever come and work for TeamLease. So it is and it is always going to be an institutionalized business run by professionals. So even for the promoters, I think their roles as shareholders are very different from their roles as executors, very distinct. The two will never blend and they don't get influence. Okay, so TeamLease will be a family, not a family-run business, and will be a professionally run organization. In terms of a product stack, simplistically put, we're talking about solving three problems, which is matching. Matching essentially means connecting demand and supply. Now, our businesses in staffing, whether it's general staffing, whether it's the recent acquisition in IT, Evolve, the permanent hiring business and Freshers World, which is the largest freshers portal in the country, essentially are trying to solve this problem. You know? How do you get supply to meet the demand? And then repair. Repair essentially is last mile interventions, right? So I'll give you examples of, again, and an anecdote which I cannot ever forget. So we were hiring for IDBI. We needed to hire about 5,000 odd kids in 100 days. So massive hiring drives were going on across the country. And but in spite of all the mobilization, there was a very high level of rejection happening. So we were not moving the needle. So our recruiters decided to sit in on some of these interviews to figure out what was going on. That why is there such high level of rejection? And we figured that it's not too big, the problem, and it can be solved. It just does need a finishing school touch. Okay? So then we decided to create an assembly line, practically. It was an assembly line. So kids would walk into our receptions and offices, and I can give you an example of the Delhi office. So they were walking into our reception and they would turn right. There were two cabins wherein they would enter. So the first cabin, if they enter, essentially these kids' rejections were that, they would come in chappals, Hawaii chappals, not comb their hair, shirts not tucked in and stuff like that. So they would turn left, right, and there was this room where we had ties kept, we had shoes kept, we had socks kept, we had body sprays because personal hygiene were all gone. To some extent, we had some shirts also, combs and everything. So essentially, their peripheral chain got done in that room. And then they would move to the next room where there would be a couple of recruiters who will take them through the basic counseling on questions. Now, please understand that these kids come from social backgrounds where they are not sensitized on personal grooming. They are not sensitized on how do you address people. How do you, basic communication skills. They are not sensitized. It's not that they may not be able to do the job. It's just that bit they don't have. So we took them in that room and we were speaking to them and we were telling them that these are the questions, how they are supposed to be greeting the interviewers. How do they start the conversation? How do they close the conversation? And the same set of people who were earlier getting rejected, our selection criteria or the conversion started improving. So after they come out from that room, they have to go left where all the client interviewers were sitting. So I remember that one, Mohit, I was telling you about Mohit is a very witty soul and quite a sport. So Mohit was also visiting TeamLease and suddenly he came out of his room and he was going towards left where the washrooms are. So one of the recruiters saw him and said, actually he was going right. So one of the recruiters saw him and said, why are you going towards the right? Please go towards the left. Interviewers are sitting there. You need to enter the first cabin on your left. So Mohit, being Mohit, he said, yes ma'am. So and he went straight towards the left. So he took a left, went to the washroom and then came back to my room and he said, who's this? I said, why? He said, no, I was just being offered a job. So by that time, she saw Mohit talking to me and she realized her mistake. The thing is, so the way Mohit stepped out, he was the version which was supposed to go left and not right. So he was wearing a shirt which had a tie and everything. So I think he got directed. So I think we got so focused around doing these last mile intervention, and that essentially is the repair process. While I'm giving you a very simplistic example of repair, but what I mean is that there are some of these small bite-sized interventions which can be done to the kids who are coming out, even if they are graduates, which help their hiring outcomes. So repair is that process. So our IIJT business, which is doing a lot of bite-sized training courses and interventions and certificate courses, are exactly meant to do this. And we went and acquired IIJT essentially to try and do this because we were having this struggle, right? 8,000 open positions, but only 3,000-4,000 were getting hired, and only 5% are getting hired in any case. So I think we were struggling with this idea, and that is the reason that we decided to invest in the repair process. I'll explain the journey a little more in detail, but IIJT was supposed to be the repair solution. But after acquiring IIJT, we also realized that that is not the end of it. You can't teach a kid in 3 months what they have not learned in 12 months of education. Okay? And hence, the last part, which is preparing supply for demand, is very important, which is essentially about delving deeper into education. It doesn't end with just fixing the employability agenda. It also means investing long-term on the education process, which in India seems to be completely mismatched, completely misaligned rather in terms of prioritization. So there is this National Occupation Code data which suggests that 90% of the kids in India require 90% of the jobs in India today require skills and not knowledge, zero knowledge. But 90% of the kids who are coming out of colleges and universities have knowledge and zero skills. So this problem, where the twain is not needed, where the employers are shouting, I'm not getting the right people, will always remain till we fix this problem. And that's why the prepare process becomes so critical. And hence our businesses, so essentially I've combined them, evolving this model. So repair and prepare are what the retail learning solution business, which is the extension of IIJT, the enterprise learning solution, which is the corporate training business that we run, at the moment largely around technical skills, but I think we'll see how it goes in the long run, whether we will diversify across non-technical skills and so on. ILS, institutional learning services, essentially are the mandates where we are helping governments train up the local youths across state governments. NETAP, which is National Employability Through Apprenticeship Program, it's actually TeamLease's fastest growing business today and the fastest ramped up business also. School Guru acquisition, which is very important because it gets in the digital component which helps in building scale. And of course, TeamLease Skill University, I'm assuming that all of you have heard, but I'll tell you a little more about TeamLease Skill University in a bit. And finally, we are introducing an ease of doing where. Essentially, for all these initiatives around employment, employability, and education, for them to converge and accrue the benefit that employers are looking at, we do believe we have to introduce an ease of doing business layer, which is a digital layer. It could be through learning solutions, workforce solutions, compliance management solutions, which will enable businesses to run their business far more productively and efficiently. So our acquisition CPO, our compliance and payroll outsourcing business at this point of time is aligned with ease of doing business, and Aventus, which is the digital compliance management solution for customers that we've acquired recently, plays to this theme. So this essentially captures all the products and solutions that we have today under the TeamLease umbrella. Okay. A little bit about our track record. Close to 2 million people have lives we have touched or hires we have done since inception. So that's the float essentially of people who've come in and gone out. But those are the kind of lives that we've already impacted. 3,700 crore in revenue we closed last year in terms of our financials. We work with more than 2,000 odd customers. We have got about 75,000 enrolled. Actually, that figure is almost a lakh. And almost 50,000 active apprentices right now at this point of time. A little bit about the growth timeline. So we started in 2002. I'm assuming you guys are aware of it. So that was our year of starting of operations. We have started with about 4 offices, 20 customers, and 40 employees. At this point of time, technically, I'm the oldest employee in TeamLease on official records. The first customer of TeamLease, you guys may not be aware, but I guess people within TeamLease should be aware, is Intel. So though Intel is right now not a customer, but it happens to be our largest customer, and I think we closed the first year with about 7 associates with them. Overall, first year of operation, we had about 800 associates. And if those days anybody would have told us that we would at some day get to 10,000 associates, I guess for us that would have been like a big deal, okay? But we got to 10,000 in 18 months, less than 18 months time. So grew to at that pace. And one promise we made to ourselves that day was that this is the last day that we are getting surprised by our own success. Yeah. Which means that there was a day we told ourselves that we will set audacious goals. We will always be unrealistic in our expectations from our own selves. Because it should never happen that we are surprised that we are successful. Okay? So, 2004, we started the permanent staffing business. So, a lot of our customers came back and saying, okay, you're taking care of my temp hirings and all, why don't you also take care of my on-roll hirings, which are for the customers on their roles. So that's how the perm hiring business started. 2005, we decided to centralize our entire back-end servicing operations for the temp business. Earlier, every branch office, every office used to do its own sales, own hiring, own servicing. But we were rapidly growing, right? And as happens maybe in growth environment, the challenges of lack of uniformity of servicing started cropping up. Control was getting compromised. The processes were becoming extremely people dependent, which means if one employee in a Delhi office quit, suddenly all hell will break loose. We will get to know about issues which were never ever highlighted. I remember one day I walked into one of these employees who suddenly disappeared, and I opened her drawer and I saw these many checks, undistributed checks lying in her drawer. Okay, so I think we realize that we do need control, and we need to kind of to also have and to ensure that there is uniformity in servicing. And that's why first we started with centralizing the associate query management process. Look, when you have more than, we have right now almost close to 200,000 associates and trainees. Okay. Now, if you were to locally start taking these queries, it's going to send you bust. That's not a scalable model. And those days we said, okay, let's just move all the query handling. And also the client servicing kids who were in the respective offices, when you ask them, invoice kyun nahi gaya? They will say, nahi, I was busy. Subah se to walk-in associates aa rahe. I was answering their queries. So, why did you not answer the associate queries? Then they will say, no, I was busy doing client servicing. So, there was always alibis getting created. And that was impacting customers. And we didn't want to let that happen. First, that moved, and then the entire back office, which means from the time attendance of each of these employees, associates came to us, running their entire payroll, the entire process which was done locally, we shifted that out of the offices to Bangalore. Our competitors rejoiced by that move because they felt that was suicidal, that was a sure-shot way of killing the business, because temp staffing, in their minds, is an extremely touchy-feely business, which means the customer would like to see you in front of them. They would want everything to happen in front of their eyes, and hence they felt that that model is not going to work. Well, there were people inside the company believed that model won't work. Okay, we still went with it, and did we lose a few customers? Oh, sure, we did, a few. But most of those people came back and started working with TeamLease. So actually, in the long and most importantly, it became a benchmark model for the entire industry eventually. Because over a period of time, people started understanding the merit of the centralization process. The fact that it made us, it's of course placed to our theme of building scale. It ensured controls were in process, quicker turnaround times. There was absolute transparency in the process. Huh? We became less people dependent in the process. Okay? 2007, so I think it was a very difficult year for us. We had more than 230 odd recruiters across the country. And we had 24 offices, by the way. And most of these offices were hiring interfaces more than anything else, because they were created to help us hire in these smaller locations. Lehman Brothers crash happened around that time, 2007, 8, that's the phase. Overnight, I think, from about coming close to about a lakh, we were about 92,000. We came down overnight to about 45,000 associates, because we had a large exposure to the BFSI sector, a large number of customers, and that sector took the hit the most. So suddenly 45,000, which means in any case, temping was becoming difficult financially, and now you have made created large infrastructure, open positions were shrinking, and hence it was just not making sense to sustain the kind of losses we were incurring on sustaining this team of 230. We actually let go more than 200 recruiters in one shot those days. And it was a very difficult decision for us. It's something that we've never done before. But this is an example of how important it is to make trade-offs sometimes. Okay? If this decision would not have happened, I guess TeamLease would not have existed today, and you wouldn't have been part of any such ecosystem. So this is a very landmark decision. It was a very hard decision, difficult one, but we had to make it. 2008, around the same time, so there were many resources available, right? Just the way we were talking about the temp team, we had invested in a 72-member team of legal advocates and counsels, okay? And across the country. And I think we built a very strong infrastructure around compliance. A lot of our customers had experienced the way we go about tackling difficult labor situations. And having done that, these customers came back saying, hey, when you can do it for the temp employees, why don't you do it for my on-roll, all my businesses as well? And I think we thought that rather than ramping down the steam, given that there has been a drastic reduction in the number of associates, why not use the same team or leverage the competency to start a business around labor compliances? And that's how, what you see the compliance, the C of the CPO business, that's how we started the compliance business in 2008. And also the first application for NetApp was submitted. I think I'll give you a capsule view of NetApp. NetApp itself usually takes as long as my today's presentation, but I'll give you a capsule of it. So in 2008, Mr. Manmohan Singh called for a meeting with thought leaders around jobs and skills, and it was a closed-door meeting, and we were part of it. And so he asked that, give me one suggestion around one thing I need to do to have 500 million skilled youth by 2022. And we said, all we need to do was amend the Apprenticeship Act. And if we do that, we automatically will embed a self-healing ecosystem which will churn employable youth in this country. So he said, great. He appointed a committee which was headed by us. And he said, tell me what needs to be done. So we went around the country. We did workshops which had which had state government officials, central government officials, corporate India, and we dive deep into what are the challenges which prevent employers from using apprenticeship or for anyone wanting to be an apprentice. And we came up with a 14-point recommendation document, which is still there in the now defunct Planning Commission website. And that was evaluated by a task force appointed by Montek Singh Ahluwalia and Narendra Yadav. They accepted each and every of those 14 recommendations, and then nothing happened. Because the political climate those days were such that there was, of course, a policy paralysis going on, that they just were not keen to make any decisions. And typical of who we are as TeamLease, we started with our raving, ranting, speaking in conferences and making everyone's lives miserable, I guess, with our recommendations. And then we suddenly got a call from Mr. Chakraborty, who was the then Principal Secretary of Labour. He said, are you guys going to rave and rant, or can you do something about it as well? So that was exactly the kind of opportunity we were looking at. So there was a Section 1(4)(c) of the Apprenticeship Act, which actually allows for a special apprenticeship scheme to be created. So we made our first application under that particular premise. It was an 800-page document which we created studying apprenticeship regimes across the world. That also, and picked up those points which are relevant to the Indian context, which we dovetail into our application. We also spoke about the different courses and curriculums that can be introduced. And our first application was made. And of course, the journey thereon, I'll probably tell you in a bit. 2009, we acquired IIJT. I think we were at that cusp, around that phase. I think 2007 and 2009 were the turning point for TeamLease in many ways. We had witnessed exponential growth, but we were also seeing very clearly what are the possible growth busters that we could encounter in the near future. And one of them clearly was this mismatch. That 8,000, 9,000 open position, only 3,000, 4,000 were getting fulfilled. And somehow there was a problem wherein we felt that the only way for us to grow would be to manufacture our own people based on what the customer needs. And that means setting up a nationwide network of training institutes. We were about to do it when one of the good things about the Lehman Brothers crash was that one company became affordable to buy. And so IIJT was one such acquisition. Though we believe that it was probably the most expensive tuition we paid to learn about the skilling, the world of skilling and the world of employability in education, because it was probably also one of our worst acquisitions ever made. But yes, we don't regret it because we learned a lot. It also helped create an extremely relevant narrative about who we are and what we intend to achieve and how we'd like to achieve. So 2009, IIJT was acquired. 2011, we signed our first MU with the government of Gujarat to setting up TeamLease Skill University. Now, after the IIJT acquisition, within 18 months of putting the plumbing together, because we are extremely conscious about operational efficacy, I guess, we realized that you can't teach the kids, like I said, in 3 months what they've not learned in 12 years of education. And hence, it's not sufficient to just solve the repair problem. But for us, to take a long view of the future, it's important for us to get involved in fixing the education agenda. And hence, the idea of TeamLease Skill University, which is supposed to be the first skill university in the country. We were initially thinking of modeling it around the community college concept in more developed countries. So we took this idea to the UGC and said, please allow us to set TeamLease Skill University, and they kicked us out. They said, you guys are mad. How can a university be vocational in nature? And I think we told them that's precisely the point. Our university will be different from any other traditional university because of 3 things. We pray to only one God, which is jobs. We offer modularity in our curriculum. we also offer blended learning, which means only 5% of our kids will ever go to a classroom. And the rest would be across apprenticeship programs, distance education, MOOCs, online courses. I think that was our idea of scaling skills in the country. Okay? But obviously they didn't get it. And we simultaneously started talking to 5 state governments with the idea of TeamLease Skill University. And I guess because state governments have the Private Universities Act, through which they can allow you to set up a university, private university. So it's not much of a surprise as the government of Gujarat, and those days Mr. Modi used to be a chief minister, was the most forthcoming about the idea of a skill university. And that's how the first MLU got signed up. 2014, we got the bill was passed and we were allowed to start, and that's how the university got kick-started in 2014. Also, our journey around NetApp got culminated and we started NetApp. In a bit, I'll tell you the rest of the story of NetApp. 2015, we crossed 1 lakh associate employees in headcount. Our draft red herring prospectus for our IPO got filed. And in 2016, I think on 12th Feb, we got listed. We are the first business services company to get listed in India. And it was a phenomenal IPO in all humility. I guess we got 69 times oversubscribed. So it was quite a thing when on the second day of the issue, we found more than 17,000 crore in our bank account. Now, that also made us realize, in India, your family members, your father, your brothers only won't lend you money. Right? But when so many strangers trust you with your money without even knowing you, it puts a lot of responsibility on you. So I think at that moment we realized that how much responsibility we carry towards actually making our vision of putting India to work come true. Okay? And we were just TeamLease. Nobody had really heard about us. When people are willing to invest in you, in spite of that, then yes, this is what that you need to get done. So I think that happened. We made acquisition of ASAP, simultaneously 2 more. We acquired Niche Pro, we acquired Keystone. Now, IT staffing is something that we as a company never gotten into. But we felt that it's imperative, given the margins, given that it's a very important segment, representative segment from an industry coverage perspective, we had to. We could have done it organically as well. But it's just that it was a matter of time. We actually managed to save maybe 6 to 7 years of the journey of trying to ramp up by making these acquisitions, and hence they became quite key for us. 2017, we acquired Freshers World, we acquired School Guru, we acquired Evolve, which is a telecom staffing, specialized telecom staffing business. And this year, we just recently announced our deal with Avantis, which is the digital compliance management solution for corporates. We have been extremely active, I think by now you should be aware, on the public policy campaign. Okay? I think, so 2005, we came out with our first India Labour Report. So India Labour Report is a series we run. So the first of this is the India Labour Report. Now, if I change the 2005 date and make it 2018, it's still relevant today. So nothing has changed between 2005 and 2018. And if any one of you would like to understand the regulatory landscape, by the way, I know this is not fiction, yet this is a report that you must read because it's very easy to read, it's very crisply articulated, and you will appreciate the environment you live in if you read this particular report. I feel it's the most effective induction document to TeamLease. 2006. So, I think we decided to become active in our public policy narrative. in terms of going out there and starting to talk about it. Again, internally at that point, there was a lot of resistance towards doing that. A lot of people believe that we shouldn't be doing this and drawing undue attention to ourselves. Essentially, if you're going around critiquing the government, you're drawing attention to yourself. Okay, and why would you do that? I think one of the things for us in all the pieces that we write, you will notice if you're reading them, that even though we talk about issues, we also in every piece of ours come back or do specify specific recommendations or specific solutions. So we are not here somebody who will just talk about the criticisms or the issues. We also come prepared with solutions. And that has been a common aspect since 2006. And also, most importantly, we were committed to running our own business 100% compliant. Which means while there are problems with the labor laws, while there are problems with our regulations, we will comply by it as is. If we are, and if we have that confidence, we can go up and talk to anyone about any changes that we aspire for, right? Because what will you come and get me at for? My house is in order. So I think we went with that approach and we went hammer and tongs. Simultaneously, we started reaching out to our competitors because we felt that all our competitors' problems are exactly the same as ours, and hence why not unify ourselves? But those days our competitors didn't care much. I think they were new into India, they were seeing the post-liberalization upward curve, and they were excited, and they felt that they don't need to be aligned on this front, but I think we left it at that. And then 2007 we became an advisor to the Planning Commission. 2008 I think we were nominated to the Prime Minister's Skill Council as an advisor to that. This all happened in the earlier regime, by the way. 2009, we set up the first employment exchange. So in quite a few of our public policy campaigns, we've been advocating that employment exchanges are phenomenal infrastructure which are spread across the length and width of the country. How many of you have been to an employment exchange? Yeah, I went to one and I felt I should have walked in with a helmet. Great real estate, but very poor infrastructure ecosystem. Now, if this is the place where you're supposedly getting jobs, it cannot be more unattractive than they usually are. So at least no kid today will ever walk into an employment exchange. And not just that, employment exchanges can't operate as silos anymore. They are not connected. By law, everybody needs to publish their open positions in employment exchange, but they don't. People eventually, it's not a law, but people can enroll, and trust me, a lot of people are enrolled into the employment exchanges, but with no outcomes. Honestly, no incentive for either. So we have been advocating that employment exchanges should morph into career centers, which means it's not just a place where you go for a job and come out if you don't get a job. You should use these properties and these infrastructure to counsel them, assess them, and say what are your deficiencies, which are the training course that you can subscribe to, and hence the outcome of a job. Okay, so I think, and we are somebody who believes that you should walk the talk. When you're saying that this is how it should be, no better way than actually taking one employment exchange and showing the world how you do it. At this point of time, TeamLease actually manages, I think, about, if I'm not mistaken, 13 employment exchanges across the country. And it's important for us that somewhere there is self-interest, because if I'm able to find some kids who can get hired for these 30,000 or more jobs which keep coming through these infrastructure, why not? Everybody benefits from it. As a matter of fact, in Bangalore, we took up one of the employment exchanges on Victoria layout, which was right in front of our earlier office. And it was on a build, operate, transfer model. So we took up that place, we built it, we managed it, and then scaled it up and handed it back to the government again, just to make them understand how a model center should be like. In 2011, Indian Staffing Federation was formed. So I was explaining to you in 2006, all our competitors shooed us away, right? They didn't want to come together. But I think in the next 5 years, they realized the challenges of operating in a business environment like ours and the binding constraint of the regulatory cholesterol. And hence, 8 of the largest staffing companies came together and started Indian Staffing Federation, like ADECO, Kelly, Randstad, DI Staffing, us, Allegiance. I think we came together and started Indian Staffing Federation. So for the last few years, almost for 6-7 years, I guess, I'm the president of this federation, and let me be very honest, it gives you immense pleasure to be elected by your competitors. Yeah, it does. And more importantly, in all humility, it is a recognition of the work TeamLease has been doing in being able to understand the regulatory context and the agenda and speaking in advance about how to solve it. Okay? I think that's what it is a recognition of. And of course, we've been able to bring about transformation within the industry as well in the manner that we ought to develop ourselves. 2013, I think the Gujarat State Assembly passed a bill notifying TeamLease University as a university. So, where was I on TeamLease University? Yeah, I think I've shared with you the journey of TeamLease in any case. In 2014, the NEEM notification for NetApp came through. So, essentially, like I said, we went with those 14-point recommendations. We created an application and gave it to the Ministry of Labour. And then what happened? I spent 2 years. I used to be in Gurgaon, Delhi those days. Done more than 40 meetings with the Ministry of Labour. The only people who never changes in the ministries? Do you know? Only people who never changes in the ministries. Huh? The peons. Okay. So I think I keep going to the Ministry of Labour even till today. The people who really help me around are the peons because they've been seeing me for a very, very long time. Bureaucrats change, politicians for sure change, but the only ones who remain are the peons. Okay? So I think I probably know every peon in that block. So those meetings, of course, have helped me gain a very important understanding of the government. When we are young, we all have an arrogance around the government. Government kuch nahi karta hai, everything about the government is bad. Yeah, we all have that. But I think the time that I spent in close proximity with the government officials made me realize one thing. That government has one thing that not even the richest man in the world has. Do you know what that is? Zor se. You said it, yes. The government has power, which nobody else has finally. And you have to make peace with it. Yes, government has their deficiencies. But if we can complement the government on their deficiencies and take up a collaborative approach, it does yield results. Yes, it takes time, but you have to be laborious, tenacious, and be at it. And finally, democracy is about million negotiations. You can never get anything done in one stroke, with one impact, on one fine day. It's just a reckoning process. So, the initial application of NetApp underwent 45 modifications. Most of the modification emanated from their lack of trust on the private sector. You're going to hire permanent apprentices. So we said, sir, initial proposal was no one would be more than 24 months in an apprenticeship program, cumulatively, even if they do multiple programs. You will have hire too young people for apprentices. Sir, no one less than 18 will be hired. You will hire old people. Sir, no one more than 40, no, 35 will be hired. I think we kept making these changes on the initial draft. Till one fine day after 2 years, I get another call from Ministry of Labour saying, Madam, ek aur sawal hai. I said, sir, itne to let. And by the way, every time they would raise an objection, it would come in Government of India ka seal and letter. So they will send it by registered post, and then they will scan it and email it to me also. So that's how the process worked. And you did the same thing in response. I said, sir, आपने वैसे ही तो 45 लेटर भेज चुके, एक और भेज देते हैं. बोला नहीं मैडम, ये ना हम आपको लेटर भेज के नहीं पूछ सकते हैं. So, सर क्या है? बोलती मैडम कैच क्या है? सारा काम आप करोगे, सारा पैसा आप खर्चोगे, आप हमसे पैसा मांग नहीं रहे होगे. There has to be a catch. Because every time anybody goes to the government, they're always looking for something, right? So I said, sir, zarur there is something in it for us, but let me explain it to you. So if each employer takes on 100 apprentices, and after 24 months journey, they feel that there are these 20 people who can be hired. Okay, 20 people who I have roles within the organization. The balance 80 is what's in it for us. Because I explained to you guys that my biggest problem is I have 8,000-9,000 open position, only 3,000 get hired. Okay? More of these 80, when they start coming up, I will be able to manage this problem better. Because now, let's say somebody wants to hire 10 people, 10 sales executives, I have to send 1,000 resumes for them. Or I have to dive into 1,000 to get those 10 people. Now, by the way, that 1,000 resume accumulation, the process, is the cost of acquisition of my candidate for just 10 people. Now, when at scale, these 80s will start coming in, we will have an extremely qualified, employable pool of resources available for employers. Employers will stop cribbing कि मुझे अच्छे लोग मिल नहीं रहे हैं, ढंग के लोग मिल नहीं रहे हैं. I will not have to spend time and energies looking for the 1,000 to hire 10. And most importantly, the kids who today go back with droopy shoulders have options. They are qualified. They will get absorbed. I have seen the real life view of this. So a few days back, we had a conference in the Oberois in Bangalore. So one of these, so we were moving around. Suddenly, one of the food and beverage attendants who usually get assigned, right, to each of the halls, he comes up to me, and I think his name is Abraham, comes up to me and said, Madam, are you from TeamLease? I said, yes. Then he says, Madam, I have to thank you. I said, why? I was deployed about 18 months back to the Oberois as a NetApp apprentice. And a week back, Oberois have absorbed me. That exactly is what we are trying to do with the apprenticeship program. When he came in, and he's, of course, there is a testimonial of his somewhere available for sure. When he joined in, he was raw. He would have never been picked up by the Oberois. But because he got aligned and he started working, he had an option of showcasing learning while doing, right? And now he is with the Oberois. That to me represents what we are trying to do through the apprenticeship program. And I kind of explained this to him, that that's my self-interest of doing it. So after all of this, he says, okay. And then finally they can come back saying, sorry madam, ये कर नहीं सकते. I said, sir, क्यों? He said, madam, precedence नहीं है, ये कभी हुआ नहीं पहले. And we said, sir, if that's the case, then India should never have been independent, right? Anyway, the joke died on me, because they didn't get it. So we started talking to the Ministry of HRD simultaneously, because for apprenticeship in India, Ministry of Skills, erstwhile Ministry of Labour, and Ministry of HRD are joint owners, custodians of the Act. Okay, because there are two kinds of apprentices. There are trade apprentices and graduate apprentices. So graduate apprentices come under the bracket of under a Ministry of HRD. So I think we started talking to them. Kapil Sibal was the minister those days, and he understood the concept immediately. And if he had a way, he would have actually notified, signed off, and allowed us to do it, setting up Meta. It's just that regulations finally. So it went to the legal ministry, and the legal ministry came back saying, for something like this to become a reality, it has to go to a cabinet because you're trying to notify it in favor of a company. And such decisions will have to go to the cabinet. But those days, anything which were going to the cabinet would never come back. And hence, one of the principal secretaries those days, and who actually helped us a lot to making NetApp what it is, Ashok Thakur, he said, why don't we route it through AICTE and notify it as a mission, National Employability Enhancement Mission. And once it becomes a mission, anyone who fulfills the criteria can apply and become a NEEM agent. And we actually drafted the Gazette notification, which finally, of course, we tried to do it as much in our favor as possible to create an early mover advantage. And that's how the NEEM Gazette came into being, and we became a NEEM agent in 2014. It just so happens, that after we did NEEM and then the scale up that has happened, we scaled up to about 35,000. But suddenly Ministry of Skill and the erstwhile Ministry of Labour realized that they missed an opportunity here. And then they started approaching us and saying, hey, how can we leverage what you're already doing under NEEM? And that's why we also signed a memorandum of understanding with the Ministry of Skills to operate the scheme as a third-party agent as well. So at this point of time, there are two regulations which supports NetApp, the NEEM regulation as well as the memorandum of understanding signed with the Ministry of Skills. I think it's also important, finally our involvement with academics have been a long one and a very fruitful one. So I don't know how many of you are aware, but every year since 2008, Manish drags themselves down to the Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy for Administrative Services, which essentially every year teaches a batch of IAS officers, and it's a reskilling, upskilling program. And we've been doing this. Now tell me, why does he do it? Why does he drag himself from Bangalore to Delhi to Mussoorie to just do this? Because it's in Mussoorie. What's the advantage?
Future.
Pardon?
The future power.
Pardon?
The future power.
Of what?
Of the building relationship.
Exactly. Absolutely. It's about sowing the seeds at the right time. So, finally, the biggest temps in this world are politicians, right? But who always stays in government, besides the peons, are the bureaucrats. Bureaucrats are the ones who actually get things done in government. They are the backbone of any government. And hence, building relationships in advance with the bureaucrats who eventually end up getting into key positions with the state government and central government helps us get access. And this is not any access. This is an access of trust, where they understand you for what you represent and what you can possibly do and what's your intent. And that's what we have been doing with these visits. At this point of time, I think we can be confident that there's somebody in some ministry that we have access which we can leverage for any of our work, if at all that comes in. So the 2009 London Business School did a case study on us. Okay, and every year, not just London Business School, 2010 Harvard has done. You can Google these case studies are available online, and some of them you might have to pay. But if any one of you ever want to access these case studies, you can write in to me. I have copies of them. You can go through that. Of course, these needs updation. So I'm working with John Mullins, who did the London Business School right at this point, kind of rework and update post the IPO. With Tarun Khanna, who did the case study for Harvard Business School, we're trying to upgrade that as well. So again, it's about influencing minds and academicians much in advance. So the people who read our case studies end up taking key positions across the corporate world, not just in India, but across the globe. And that is the idea. So from last year, I've started teaching a batch on labor laws and XLRI. Why? Same reason. Because these become CHROs and HR heads eventually. So you will have to sow the idea of TeamLease and what is our agenda as much in advance as possible. And that's why you do it. And trust me, they can be sometimes very back-breaking. From here going to Jamshedpur is not, from Bangalore to going to Jamshedpur is not the easiest of things. But you still do it because it has, again, it's about taking a long view into that. So the three opportunities, I think from an employment perspective, it's important for us to kind of fix the 4 geographies of work. Enterprise geography, I told you, 63 million enterprises, only 9 lakh registered, when we've got 1.3. We have to do whatever it takes to make India a win-win ecosystem to encourage entrepreneurship. India, people believe, has a hostile habitat, is a hostile habitat for entrepreneurs. We need to change that perception. Ease of doing business, that's why, becomes so critical to enable the enterprise geography of work to kick in, which means to have more formal employers in the country. Physical geography of work. Again, you've heard this before, but we have been taking people to jobs, but we have to now start the process of taking jobs to people, and that can happen if we have more cities coming up, cities which can become job clusters. Right now, there are very few job clusters in the country. We need to have more such job clusters across the length and breadth of the country. Sectoral geography of work. Manufacturing employment, it has been less than 12%. Self-employment is 50%. Agricultural employment is about 350 million. Informal employment is 90. We have to change this order. And we have to rejuvenate manufacturing. You know, I don't know whether you're aware, but 80% of the manufacturing in India today happen in organizations which have less than 20 people. Now, that's not the kind of scale that we are talking about. So, manufacturing at scale has to be rejuvenated. And legislative geography of work. I mean, I've spoken to you enough about the problems in our labor laws, but yeah, this is something we have to fix. For example, our employment contracts, employment offer letters, it's essentially marriage without divorce. So that's not how it can work, and we need to really relook at many of these regulations. Employability opportunity, it's about fixing the mismatch problem right now. That's all that it takes, and we believe that a widespread massification of apprentices is the best route towards solving this problem. And finally, about the social signaling value. You know, no matter how much we trash degrees, degrees definitely doesn't get you jobs, but degrees get you what?
Access to open sector.
It helps you get a future life partner. In India, degrees matter to shadi karne ke liye. Yeah, in India, but that's a very important social signaling value, and hence we have to make peace with it. And that is the reason why logically we can go around hammering degrees. But what we are trying to say is that that's why can we make a connect between the apprenticeship programs and the MOOCs courses and create a corridor towards a degree. And that's why we are saying that can the hours they spend in apprenticeship program be linked to a degree at the end of it? Because that matters finally in a country like India. And of course, there has been a market failure in financing. So nobody in India wants to pay for training, by the way. Our employer doesn't want to pay for training, but he wants to pay for trained resources. Employee doesn't want to pay for training till he or she is guaranteed a job at the end of it. Bankers don't want to lend to these candidates till they are assured that the guy will get a job at the end of it, and hence we believe the only way to solve the problem is through government financing at some point. Otherwise, this vicious circle will continue. And finally, education. I think there has to be a shift in our education thought world from enrollment to outcomes. Essentially, in India, funds or the entire financial allocation around education is dependent on enrollment rather than assessing outcomes. Like in the US, for example, people's colleges and schools, their access to funds is clearly linked to the final outcomes of the students. The colleges and schools with better outcomes or better results actually get more funds than the ones that don't. But in India, that is not how it happens. In India, we're just so focused on input that we completely negate the importance of output. And I think that's showing up in the livelihood outcomes of our kids today, in spite of getting degrees and so on and so forth. Also, is it important for every kid to go to a college? Like, just to share with you, about 1% of the retail attendants in US in 1970 used to have a degree. Okay, so today that's gone up to about almost 20%. I think 5% of the 30%. 5% of the college kids in the cab drivers in Korea used to have a college degree in 1917s. Today, that is almost 60%. 15% of the security guards in India today have a college degree. So essentially, college is not what it meant to be, or what it used to mean, and hence, why is it necessary for everyone to go to a college? How many of you know the cutoff percentage for Delhi University in today's time in most of the better colleges? It's actually 100%. It's already 100%. Then what will you do after that? We often wonder. So our premise is that why should after 12 you go for a degree? Why can't you take left and get into an apprenticeship program? Okay. In any case, how many of you have attended a regular college? I mean, graduate college. How many? Okay. Now the next question: how many of you have attended classes? Are you sure? Oh my God. Anyway, I didn't. So I went to a college for 3 years. And I mastered the art of giving my attendance and getting out of the class. I really don't remember doing any classes. So essentially, and that's the case, I'm the majority, I believe. You guys might be, some of you might be the exceptions, who will go to college, who is enrolled into a college, but they spend more time in the cafeteria or the bus stop outside the college than in the classrooms. So our premise is that if that is what most kids do, then why don't you get them enrolled into an apprenticeship program where they utilize their time by learning, which also helps them create a base of on-the-job training, and they can simultaneously enroll into a Bachelor's of Business Operations or anything like that. And by the end of 3 years, they come out as well-rounded professional, highly employable. Because, okay, somebody wants degree, they have a degree. Not everybody wants work experience, they already have that. And hence you will suddenly see a complete change in the outcome of these graduates who today earn less than 6,500 rupees when they come out of colleges. I think that's our premise in terms of solving the current employability challenge. And finally, education, geography of work. I've already explained that to you, the high levels of dropouts. Only 30 lakhs of the 165 lakh students who take the 10th exam will end up in any college. And hence we have to think heavily on alternative outcomes for these people who drop out at each level. Okay? Now, who are the different stakeholders in TeamLease? And it's an important slide to kind of assimilate. Our customers. And customers, they only care about accuracy and responsiveness. I don't think customers care about anything else. Our whole employees, they essentially are looking for an environment which inspires them, from an environment through which they can learn and grow. And that's all that they care about. The policymakers, policymakers, they only, their only consideration is, can they trust us? Which I think all our public policy campaigns and investments from 2006 has been to just enable this. Sometimes I feel like summing up this slide as saying that if anybody asks me, and if anybody gives me only a 10-second opportunity of telling them what TeamLease does, I think I like to tell them that TeamLease is in the business of selling trust. And that's exactly what we do. Whether it's towards candidates, employers, public policy makers, investors, everyone, I think the crux of it is we are in the business of selling trust. And that makes us who we are. Policymakers, I think it's an investments in the academics we have been doing for a very long time, and we have reached a stage where we can confidently say that unko lagta hai ki hum chor nahi hai. And somebody that they can rely and trust. Investors, they only care about growth and maybe ROE to some extent. So I think as long as we register growth, they're happy. And finally, media. What do you think media cares about?
Story.
So, essentially what kind? What's the category? Any story or a particular kind of story? Okay. Assimilate all of them. All of you are correct, but there is a single line definition. Single word. What gets their attention? I'm having this water, whoever it is. Okay. Yeah. What is it that media cares about?
Outreach.
Sorry?
Outreach.
Yeah, but who? I mean, what will they cover? If they have 10 stories to cover, which one do they end up covering?
The one which would garner more attention.
Yeah. Essentially, media only cares about interesting people and interesting stories or interesting companies, right? Essentially, for media, we've been able to, I think, I don't know, there has been one story about TeamLease which has come out every day since the last decade, by the way. And there are big companies bigger than us also who cannot boast of the same. We are not boasting, but it's a reality. Okay? The fact that they consider us an interesting company, because by the way, there are so many others also in the space which does exactly the same thing as we do. But why do we stand out? Again, it's about being interesting. And how do you become interesting, by the way? Huh? Not necessarily. No, look, there is a way to controversy. Essentially, anybody who attempts to be different, or anybody who stands out, or anybody who exhibits uniqueness. I mean, on one hand, you can call it controversial. On the other hand, you can call all of the above. Okay? So essentially, we have been able to continuously sustain their interest by always being unique. And by the way, it doesn't happen automatically. So when we have, at any point of time, we have 15, 16 spokespeople of TeamLease, by the way. And not one or two. And that's a conscious strategy. There will never be a person talking about TeamLease or even 2-3 people talking about TeamLease. There are more people, which has an impact, which means that there is spread. Our ability to, but that needs investment, which means that's why our internal communication has to be so strong that anyone and everyone understands, has the same messaging. Way of delivery could be very different, but our messaging remains the same. The reason I'm taking you through the storyboard is also for you to understand our messaging. What do we represent? What do we talk about? And it also means that to be interesting, you have to invest in learning. The reason we stand out or we always have something to say or share which gets their attention is because we ourselves have a huge appetite for learning new things and assimilating new things. I've been with Manish long around to understand when he says that how he used to write 15 years back or 17 years back and how he does now. So I have seen those articles, but I have also seen how he has become better and the effort he puts into being better. And that's why I think about 7-8 years back, I went up to him and told him that, as a matter of fact, I just watched what he was doing and I started emulating it. Manish reads 5 newspapers a day, and one fine day I said, okay, I'm going to also read 5 newspapers a day. And by the way, I'm not talking about Mumbai Mirror. I'm talking about 5 business dailies. Okay? And yes, initially it was a struggle. Initially, you're not used to doing something, but now it's just a habit. It's like waking up and brushing your teeth. It's become so much part of the ecosystem. It helps me with so many talking points. And believe it or not, I get inundated by media calls, whether I like it or not, even through weekends. But there's one rule I have followed with them. And so anybody who aspires to be a media spokesperson, it's probably something you might find it useful. I have never ever told them I shall come back to you. I have always had answers to them when they're calling. Please understand, media people, they are always working on very tight deadlines. They don't have time. They have to turn around stories in, and they always will call you at the last minute. They will. That's how it is. And then you cannot. If you tell them I'll come back to you, you've lost the story. And for you to be able to give them a response, that's why learning becomes so important. If you are not constantly reading and making notes, stories who may not seem relevant today might become relevant tomorrow. Data, for example, sensitivity, understanding of data. Like I just did a ISF conference, and some of the regular members told me, Ritu, is baar na hame data mat dena. That's okay, fine. Because usually data is essential in any media story because that factually articulates your position. And hence you always have to be intimate with data. Okay? Essentially, for us to be able to be an interesting company has been an investment constantly on learning about our environment. And it is not endowed on anyone. By the way, anyone can talk to the media. It's just, if you have the spirit of learning, you can talk to the media. But if you don't, you will not be able to. No matter how flamboyant you are, no matter how good you are in talking, it will fizzle out eventually. Okay? TeamLease values. I think this is something that you have to all embrace and understand. I think it's a very simple stack. We call it the SALAD. SALLAD. Easy to remember. It starts with scale. I think, when you're saying that your vision is putting India to work, it is inevitable you can't do it without scale. Without thinking scale, breathing scale, without imbibing scale. Now, for staffing business, this is an exercise that I've done, that I've gotten every function to essentially go through the value stack and come up with an example of how they can relate scale for that function. Now, scale can be something for us overarchingly for TeamLease. But what should be the scale for a salesperson? What is scale? The meaning of scale for a person who is in operations. What is scale for them? Now, each one's definition could be different, but when all of them think, cumulatively, it actualizes our vision of scale for the companies, right? For example, if an operations guy today is rolling out 100 offer letters in 1 hour's time, My idea of scale for that person is that person spending time thinking, that person, not his boss, his manager. How do I think that can I figure out a way by which I can roll out 400 offer letters in 1 hour? And that is an example of living or actualizing the value of scale in our work. Like if a sales guy has a target, okay, now how does he build scale? Now he's saying that today typically my outreach is possible. I reach out to 50 companies in a month, okay, for me to get to my XYZ. What if I am figuring out, what if I can think of a way by which I can touch 200 companies in a month? Anything that can help me target 200 a month. Now, when every individual starts thinking like that, is when you start exhibiting scale within the organization. I just gave you a couple of instances, but I think each one of you in your own functions can come up, how can I contribute towards scale? And that's when we start actually living this value. Aggression. Now, for us, aggression is not shouting and screaming. And we do believe aggression is a positive trait, unlike what many people like to believe. Aggression, again, how each functions can define aggression. If I have a tat of responding to a customer, let's say in 24 hours, right? Aggression is that while I have 24 hours, is there a way I can respond to the customer in an hour's time? That is aggression. A sales guy, he met his target in 15 days for the whole month. Yet, he says, I'm going to now go and achieve 150% of my monthly target, and he doesn't stop at that 100%. While he need not, by the way. Right? His target was, he's done it in 15 days. I think, again, aggression is something which is in our bloodstream. Anything that you can do in 2 days, why should I have to wait for 2 days? Why can't I do it in 1 day? Any target or any ambition which I think can be achieved in 5 years' time, can I achieve it in 3 years' time? That to us is aggression. And because of that trait, I think while the industry, staffing industry I can talk about, might be growing at 15 to 18%, but TeamLease consecutively for the last 5-6 years have been growing at 20-25% plus year on year. Is because of this. Because we are not making peace with what is possible. Just we're stretching ourselves beyond, and that's why I think people code their destinies the way we've been. We're still on the way, but hope to continue at it. And long view, I think over the course of today's conversation, I've given you enough examples of taking a long view. Our trip to Missouri every year since 2008 is long view. Our public policy campaign, which we started in 2005, is an example of taking a long view. So I'll have to share with you this story. I mean, when we were doing our IPO roadshow, this happened in one of our meetings in New York, that one of the analysts told us that, listen, why is it that we only hear TeamLease talking about, amongst all the staffing companies, we only hear about TeamLease when it comes to anything to do with public policy advocacy. Why are all your other, other players or competitors, we never hear about them? So there is a story we told them, which we often tell ourselves, which is there was this man with 2 wives. And needless to say, he died. So one of the wives actually were breaking her bangles and shouting and screaming and saying, Bhagwan, mera pati ko wapas kar do, and all of that. And the other wife, she was sitting in one corner in the hall where the husband's body was kept, happily munching away an apple. So the people who were visiting, pay their homage and all, they were coming in and they were very surprised by that other woman's behavior. And so they walked up to her and said, what is wrong with you? I mean, how come you are so calm and enjoying yourself? Don't you want your husband back? Look at her. So she said that, look, unlikely my husband will come back. But if she does, अगर उसका पति वापस आ जाएगा तो मेरा भी आ जाएगा ना. So essentially, if she's doing all the hard work, unlikely there is going to be any result. But if it happens, it will not just happen for her, right? It will happen also for me. Her husband comes back, my husband comes back. I think our competitors' approach to labor reform has been like that. That these guys are idiots. It's not going to happen. Unnecessarily, they're drawing attention towards themselves. And if, unlikely, at some point it does happen, it's not going to happen for just TeamLease alone. It will happen for everybody in the environment. But one miscalculation our competitors did, which is that when finally labor reform starts to happen, which has started to happen with the changes in the Apprenticeship Act, changes that have happened in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, everybody in the world believes it has happened because of TeamLease. And I think they hugely miscalculated the leverage that you get from that perception or that belief that is there across corporate world, across policymakers, across the academy. Some changes might have happened which we may not have had a direct involvement. Also, people think TeamLease has gotten it done. And why so? By the way, because if you see our write-up since 2006 and you compare it with the legislative changes, it's exactly in line with the solutions that we have been recommending for so many years. Okay? So, for example, 2 years back, Jaitley in his budget speech had quoted us in as many words, exactly what we had used the phrases, he used that in his budget speech. So we were running this petition on salary choice, that we believe that one of the elements of informalization stems from the fact that so much deduction happens on people's salaries and wages, and we believe that employees should be given the choice of deciding whether they want to contribute their share of the PF, whether they want to contribute, and this is for people with less than 21,000 salary, whether they want to contribute to EPS or to the NPS, they want to contribute to ESIC, which is a state employment insurance corporation scheme, or to a privately regulated, IRDA regulated insurance program. So we ran this petition, it was well accepted by corporate India. We took after the signatories, we took the petition to the Ministry of Finance and Labour. And then Jaitley in his budget speech actually said that EPFO and ESIC do not have clients but have hostages. Exact phrase that we had used in our petition. So when that happens, then everybody believes that changes have happened because of TeamLease. And that's how your brand gets built, your credibility gets built. That's how the gap gets created between you and the West. Okay? So that's taking a long view. And then we believe, okay, so essentially, can you guys see this? Can you guys see this? So essentially the next value is of learning and improving. Okay? So again, I think in TeamLease this is the core principle. People can survive not too far in TeamLease without exhibiting the trait of learning and improving. We all have always believed that you can't hire perfect people. You can't ever have perfect resources. The idea in TeamLease is to hire ordinary people but make them perform together at their peak. Okay? And that happens when you embed the culture of learning and improvement. We all have to exhibit Any one of you, by the way, if you're not spending time in learning something new every day, then you're doing yourself a huge disfavor. I remember when I was fighting with my dad that after my graduation, I wanted to go and work. I said, I don't want to pursue any more studies. First, I want to work, and then I want to do my MBA. He said, no, abhi kar lo. And then his way of convincing me was, बस 2 साल और study कर लो, पढ़ाई कर लो, उसके बाद lifelong छुट्टी. That was the biggest lie, by the way, our parents, with all good intention, they could have ever told us. Because learning doesn't stop with those 2 years, by the way. It is lifelong. Okay? So I would urge each and every one of you that please spend some time picking up a new skill, learning something new every day. And then about aligning prose and poetry. So, we've always believed that in the early stages of a company, it's the poetry which creates the narrative, right? It gets the attention. But then when you, like in our case, when you are already a 16-plus-year-old company, after you move from the 10th year phase to the next decade, essentially you have to walk the talk. Then it has to become a perfect balance between your narrative and what you get done. Because if that balance is not maintained, people again will not trust you. Because then people will write you off as a bunch of bullshitters, right? Like I'll give you an example. There are 2 people in the recent times in political history who won elections very high on emotional narrative or passionate narrative. Do you know who these 2 people are? They brought about a tsunami in human emotions in the country, in different parts in the country. It's very obvious. So, who? One name? Okay, and who's the other? One is Modi. Who is the other? Sorry? No. Huh? Kejriwal. So essentially, it is Modi and Kejriwal, right? Very high on their narratives, their emotional, powerful narratives, right? So which means they were very high in their poetry before they got elected. And after they got elected, what happened? So Modi switched gears to governing through prose, and Kejriwal couldn't. So that's why he sat on a dharna in his own government. I'm trying to make you understand that you always campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. However, and that's why getting the perfect balance between the 2 again in our roles and everyone's roles, by the way. It's not just my role or Shantanu's role. Each one of your role, you have to strike a balance between the poetry and prose. Which means how much of your time is going in poetry. Yeah, there are some teams which should not do disproportionately one over the other. Like finance should do very little poetry. I mean, finance cannot figure out creative ways of writing balance sheets, right? They shouldn't. However, finally, poetry is what? Poetry is creating inspiration daily for you to prepare yourself for the future. Right? What is it that you will look forward to is what poetry determines. And hence, if you don't create something in your own life to look forward to, but that doesn't mean that you don't have to get through the day doing what you had to come to office to do. Right? But keeping that half an hour, 1 hour every day towards building that future is that perfect alignment or the perfect balance between the 2 is essential to build a strong business. I think the thing about successful companies or companies who have lasted more than 100 years, of course, the expiry date of companies are increasing day by day. The pace at which companies are dying are increasing day by day. But the ones who last if you go through all of their history, you will see what they have gotten done right is this. They've always managed to create this balance of poetry and prose right. And finally, for us, it's all about doing well by doing good. And when I say doing good, I'm talking about creating an opening balance, impacting lives and changing lives. I mean, you guys are not recruiters, but I keep telling my recruiters, when I ask these recruiters, आप क्या करोगे 2 साल बाद हम corporate में काम करेंगे. I at times wonder, what is this corporate? What is this in TeamLease that we are doing? But we sometimes undermine, and now that you're part of the TeamLease ecosystem, you sometimes undermine the work that you're doing and the impact you have. Essentially, each one of you in some way or the other is changing the life of a youth somewhere. And I think people in School Guru should understand. I mean, you're attached to so many universities across the country, and these universities are about what? It's about changing the lives of the youth. And gainfully, it's not just getting them out of the exit gate. It's about ensuring that you also enable them by taking charge of their destiny after they leave the college. It's not about just seeing them through the college, right? And that's what brings us to work every day. The fact that we are doing well by doing good. It's not just us doing well. And I remember when somebody was asking me, why did you choose TeamLease to work for? Because I was with a multinational and I was doing very well in Monster. Most successful salesperson in Asia Pacific, fat incentives. I took a pay cut and joined TeamLease. I did why? Because there are 3 things. I mean, I wanted to work in a company which was fun to work at, of course, which TeamLease always been, because it's a very young, vibrant, high-energy company. Secondly, it has to be economically viable. It had a viable economic model, which means it had a strong, sound business model. And finally, wanted to work for a company which is doing good for India. And in TeamLease, we have a culmination of all these 3 elements, honestly. And that last bit of doing well by doing good, and especially for India, is extremely motivating and inspiring for us. Okay? So that's our value system. So our financial goals, the starting business has to scale up to 14,000 crore plus by 2023. 3% margins, we should grow at least 25% CAGR year on year. All our other lines of business should scale up to 300 crore businesses apiece with at least 30% margin to our bottom line. And we have to maintain a return on equity of 25%. I mean, this is what makes us the darling of the stock market, and it also makes you conscious about your frugality. We have to be frugal with our capital, and that's a great indicator of that. From our perspective, our strategy is very clear. We're going to constantly groom and nurture talent. We will never be able to hire perfect resources, but we'll hire average, ordinary resources to the right attitude and nurture them and grow them. We'll have the most aggressive B2B sales force in the country, across any business, across any industry. There will be an operations convergence. Now, essentially, it's about customer first. When you become large, and we have gone through that, we've made those mistakes where silos start getting created. Just to handle a problem, a department gets created. Because there is a problem, you think the best way to solve the problem is to put another org structure. And hence, org structure becomes unwieldy and hence goes away further and further away from the customer. We believe that our entire model of servicing our customers need to converge, and I think that's the reason we've done massive org changes in the org, especially in the staffing business. Hiring, I think, it probably is the biggest problem right now, but I think it's a very integral part of our future strategy. We have to get hiring right. All the acquisitions that are happening, they need to converge in terms of building a capability towards hiring for our customers at scale across different functions, locations, and at minimal cost. From a corporate perspective, our focus is very clear that we'll have to constantly invest in new products and adjacencies which complement our core business, complement our theory of the three E's, and also contributes towards rapid margin expansion. So what have we learned? I'll summarize it as fast as I can. I mean, in summary, we've learned that finally it is a perfect dance between poetry and prose, which we have to maintain depending upon our evolution. By the way, while for TeamLease services, there could be a certain evolution. For School Guru, the evolution could be different. But knowing where you stand and hence creating this balance is very important. Also, the respect for the diversity of art and science. I mean, some of the work that we do is art and some science, but again, they go hand in hand. Metabolism, I think it's important to have a highly metabolic organization, and that can be done by having very clear definitions of roles and responsibilities, by having a well-defined rewards and recognition policies, by encouraging a culture of conflicts and trade-offs. In TeamLease, we like people fighting with each other. I mean, not fighting for lunch, but we like people fighting for issues that impact each other. Because finally, we work in an environment where we are interdependent, right? If somebody doesn't do their job, it will affect your own, and hence, fighting for the right reasons at the right time is something which we encourage. We don't encourage getting abusive or getting into fist fights and physical fights with each other. But fighting is a good thing because it enables transparency. And finally, sunshine is the best disinfectant. So the more you fight in front of each other, the less you will backbite each other. And trade-offs. I think I gave you examples of trade-offs that we have made. You know, there are situations when you will be at the crossroad with two right answers, but you can choose only one. And having the maturity, like from, let's say, two people, two functions are battling with each other. From their perspective, they are right. But then there is only one right for the organization, and having the ability and maturity to pick that over our individual interest is what we encourage. And we are a bunch of people who always believe in setting unrealistic goals. Because that's the only way, because, you know, human potential is infinite, but we don't recognize it. And setting unrealistic goals is essentially how we can get ourselves to rise to the occasion and fulfill them. And finally, time. We believe that the best part of the life depends on the second half of the chessboard. So this guy, the guy who created the chessboard, took it to the king. The king was thrilled. He was so happy. He told this guy that, you tell me, what do you want? Anything you want, I'll give it to you. Ask for it. So this guy says, I don't want anything. What you do is that in the first block of the chessboard, you put one grain and you keep doubling them with each block. So then the king was saying, this guy is mad. He could have asked anything from me. He asked just this. So by the last but one row, this guy had almost 500 million tons of food grains, which is greater than the total food grain capacity of the world. And by the last block of the chessboard, he had more food grains than the height of Mount Everest. Essentially, the message, the moral here is that all of us undermine the compounding impact that happens in the latter half of our career. People switch jobs for 500 rupees, 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees. People switch jobs because someone somewhere has promised a fancy designations, without realizing that when you stay invested in a job and you learn and grow, the compounding impact is bound to kick in. And hence you have to have the perseverance and tenacity to see through that. I mean, I can tell this to you because I have witnessed it in my own life. I I have had many people who were along with me in TeamLease at the starting phase. Okay, and many of them, they are great resources, have, for whatever be their reasons, they chose other paths. But I can confidently tell you that I'm so glad about the path that I have chosen. Because I have seen all of that compounding impact come back and help me. Everything that people went away chasing at some point in the earlier phase or the other is something which is happening much sooner to me than probably to the others. Okay? So, when you have dessert, by the way, dessert, sweet dish, when do you have? After meals, right? There is a reason why sweet dish is not as tasty before a meal. I mean, I do know some crazy souls who like to start their meals with desserts. But then that's the thing about deferred gratification. You know, deferred gratification is deferred gratification. It becomes far more enjoyable, far more fruitful. Okay? I know we belong, not I, maybe many of you belong to a generation which believes in instant gratification. I think this applies and this messaging is more for those people. And finally, risk. I think it's very simple that higher the risk, higher the interest. But yes, you have to qualify your risk and hence go for it. I mean, our risk appetite as a company is very high. And we have chosen to take those risks, and at the right times, some work, some don't, but mostly it works out. But you cannot again aspire to be a large, ambitious company without having the necessary risk appetite, I guess. And finally, about India, I think India is it's an interesting country to be in, where your rights as a citizen always are lesser than your rights as a consumer. For example, in India, more people have access to smartphones than they have access to a toilet. That's the reality of being in India. Many people believe that India is a large market. India actually is a small market, but with large potential. And that potential is exhibited in our ability to make those 5 transitions possible, the labor market transition. And finally, democracy is about million negotiations. You cannot get done anything in one stroke. It happens over a period of time, but you have to be active to get it done. Decentralization, finally, India doesn't need one gigantic super brain sitting out of New Delhi. Especially when it comes to the matters of jobs and skill, it's very localized problems. And hence, 29 chief ministers matter more than one prime minister, and maybe 100 mayors eventually become more. Because when you defragment administration and political governance to that level, I think it should go to the panchayat level. You will see better outcomes for us as a country. Right now, I think all the rhetorics are around what one person sitting out of Delhi is doing or not doing. I think we have to empower the states to take the necessary decisions and drive the destiny, because India is very diverse. And hence, what is good for Delhi may not be good for Orissa, or may not be vice versa good for a Tamil Nadu. And hence, understanding that and empowering states doing the needful is critical. And of course, we need a more adventurous state, somebody who's bold, who's not willing to, who doesn't fall prey to populism, and who will do things what's right for the country is essential. Some of it has been exhibited by the current government, but let's see what happens thereon. In conclusion, I think finally, the reality of India is that there are 300 million kids who will never ever, drive a car that they help clean, or read the newspaper that they deliver, or live in the house they help do. I'm sure you're aware of Pandit Nehru's Tryst with Destiny speech. So, looks like we miss that Tryst with Destiny. But we can change that. Again, As a company, we believe it's possible to change it by innovating right at the intersection of between things. I just have to. The problem here is that in India, everybody knows what needs to be done. Every paper about every problem has been written, recommendation has been detailed. But the challenge is with execution. Like Thatcher had this minister in her cabinet called John, and one day she got and who loved making committees to solve every problem. So one day Thatcher got very frustrated and she said, John, do you know what your problem is? That your brain is not connected to your backbone. Essentially, again, India has an execution problem. I don't think we have a dearth of ideas, dearth of inputs on what needs to be done. It's about getting it done. And finally, for us at TeamLease, I think this is the biggest entrepreneurial venture. I mean, once in a lifetime opportunity where we have probably laid our hands on. And hence, I think for all of us, this is our life's work now. Because we know that there cannot possibly be a better opportunity out there. And we also realize that we've been a fairly lucky company. So do you know about Napoleon? He was asked to choose between a lucky general and a skilled general. Which one did he choose? Who did he choose? He did choose. I mean, I think some of you have already gone through my session, maybe. The first one where actually somebody said lucky. Yeah.
He can be trained to become a skill.
I think luck is luck. I mean, finally, but the thing is that how you maximize on that luck. So I think we are a very lucky company. And we are lucky to be in the right place at the right time. It's now up to us in terms of how we maximize thereon. And so it's about growth mindset. I think we'd like to be a company with a growth mindset. So there is this book by Carol Dweck, which I would recommend all of you to read, called Mindset. Carol Dweck, Caroldweck, where she talks about two kinds of people in this world. One, those who have fixed mindset. Fixed mindset people are great achievers, by the way. They are brilliant individually. They are extremely skilled. But what happens is that typically these are people who have gotten themselves to believe that they are the best they can be. They can't be better than what they already are. And the growth mindset people are the ones who believe that they have an opportunity to improve and become better. I think we believe in a team of people who believes in growth mindset. By the way, nothing is etched in iron. A growth mindset person can become a fixed and fixed can become growth. I would recommend you all reading this book because it's not just helpful professionally. I think it's invaluable even personally, how you deal with your spouses, your children, great guideline, and how growth mindset helps you in dealing with those situations. So for us, we believe in investing in creating a culture of growth mindset and deliberate practice. I keep giving this example of Steffi Graf. Steffi Graf had the most lethal forehand in the tennis circuit. A lot of people believe that even some men players can also not stand up to her forehand. It was so good, it was so powerful. And she's been a winner, right? She had won multiple Grand Slams, this cup, that cup. She's proven herself all through her career. Till one person evolved in the tennis circuit who kind of threatened her existence. You know who that person was? Monica Seles. Monica Seles, but Steffi had a weakness, which is her backhand. But her forehand was always so lethal that she never had to resort to her backhand. But Monica Seles exposed her backhand because she herself had a very lethal backhand. But by the time Monica Seles came into the circuit, Steffi is already Steffi Graf. She'd already won enough medals, cups, and so on and so forth. But Steffi being Steffi, she did not let herself believe that I'm the strongest in the forehand and I am the winner, and then so what? She'd gotten into focusing on improving her backhand religiously. And again, that's an example of deliberate practice. Till the point she made her backhand as good as her forehand towards the latter half of her career. I think that's an example of deliberate practice. She had nothing to prove, by the way, to herself or to the world. She was always a winner and by a long distance. But she still invested in doing that. Sergei Bubka, have you heard about pole vaulter? Yes. He used to show up in Olympics or World Championship not to win the gold medal, which always was his in any case. But do you know why he used to show up for all these World Championships or Olympics? I don't know. Do look up the pole vaulting records for the last 20-25 years and you'll know the answer. He used to show up to each of these championships not to win the gold medal, but to better his best. Again, why did he have to do that? Because as far as I remember those days when I used to follow it, at least 15 of the records were all his. So his job, he would come to one of them, he will break his record and that will become the new world record. Then he'll come back again, he'll break that record. I would urge you to look up his documentary on YouTube, which tells you about the path he took and the hours he spent, in spite of being the undisputed world champion, in practicing his skill, in the skill of pole vaulting, where he would even fight for that marginal 0.01% bettering his record every day, 0.02. I mean, that is deliberate practice. Right? The question here is that are we in TeamLease doing that in our respective jobs and roles? Are we investing in this deliberate practice of becoming? It's not again, guys, about winning the gold medal. You know, you can win the gold medal in various championships and yet be worse off than your previous record. Right? Possible. But his objective was very clear. It was not winning the gold medal. It was bettering the best. His best. Okay? I think that's about deliberate practice. And finally, we live in a society and not an economy. No matter how much we say that degrees se job nahi milta hai, but you get married. And hence, you always have to bear in mind and hence you always have to include that in your consideration of how you recalibrate your policies, how you approach your businesses, and so on and so forth. And guarantee, I think life has no guarantees, but if you find the right place at the right time, life has no guarantees. And most of the time, we don't know what is the right time. But if we find the right place, we should बोलते हैं ना सामान वामान लेके वहीं पे बैठ जा and get settled there because sooner or later your right time will definitely come. So there is this famous Calvin and Hobbes. We love Calvin and Hobbes. I love them personally and I think many of us love Calvin and Hobbes. So one day Calvin goes underneath a tree, an apple tree and makes himself comfortable and goes out to sleep. So Hobbes comes and says, what are you doing? He said, I know this is the right place. I just don't know the right time. So I'm going to go sleep off now. I think for us in TeamLease, we are confident we are in the right place. We don't know when it's going to be the right time for the business to really expand and boom. The tipping point for us is when en masse labor reform happens. We don't know when that will happen, but whenever it does, we are absolutely suitably positioned to kind of take advantage of that. Okay? Thank you so much. That's all I've got. Now you know why I told you that we have to start early. Okay, any questions that you have, you can ask me now. Now it's question time. And trust me when I say that any question, you can ask me anything.
We are talking about the flood, we are talking of putting India to work. And at the same time, we have around 1.5 million engineers passing the game. So is that the agenda which is coming from or you don't know?
Even that, how many engineers are in the room? Engineers are my absolute favorites because the amount of time I spend. Okay, so
Yeah,
then
just the one point which is, I think, concerned is around 10% of the guidelines are managed.
I know. So look, while the problem seems so grave when it comes to engineers, however, it is reflective of all kinds of graduates as well in the country. Why engineers makes it grave? Because the years and years of signaling that has gone saying if you become an engineer, तुम्हारा lifelong channel of अच्छी गाड़ी, अच्छी नौकरी, अच्छी छोकरी, अच्छी bangla is guaranteed, right? When that is being challenged. I remember, I come from Durgapur, which is such an education-oriented city where there are only two things children can do. Either you become a doctor or an engineer. But now let me tell you what has been different in the world of medicines and engineering. What happened is, there was a realization, of course, at some point that yes, the country needs more doctors, more engineers. In case of engineers, what we did was that we ensured relaxation of the entry and the exit gate because we wanted quantities. Okay? At some point, it might have been fueled by the sudden huge demand which erupted in the tech sector. Possible. But in the medicine sector, by the way, it was not relaxed. So now what has happened is while the quality of our doctors are very high, we don't have enough doctors in the country, right? But because in case of engineers, we wanted to solve the quantity problem first and we relaxed the entry and the exit, you're sitting on a pile of engineers, okay, who are coming from any and every colleges and anywhere engineering colleges have mushroomed. They are not cutting the bill when it comes to quality anymore. Nobody noticed it till about recently because of the thanks to the IT sector, who would indiscriminately pick anyone from who has an engineering degree, which means somehow inka guzara ho ja raha tha. But now, when the tech sector has clamped down and said, look, I want quality, okay? I want the right attitude, the right skills, which means their hiring criteria of engineers have improved or changed and transformed. And that's one. Secondly, they are not hiring enough engineers today. So now there is a reality check on the suddenly people are talking that engineers are not employable. Well, that is something which was going on. It was work in progress. We were just not waking up to it because as long as they're getting hired, why should I worry? It's not that the country doesn't need engineers. It's just that A, we don't need as many engineers as are coming out, and B, not with the skill set, quality that they're coming out with. I personally, that's why I'm not in favor of that thought world that every kid to kind of prove their worth have to either become a doctor and an engineer. Because that no more is the game. I think that recalibration needs to happen. The ones who are already engineers have to focus on rampant skill building and upskilling. Because yes, they are not employable. I can tell you, from my experience, I was talking to Saurabh Govil, who is a CHRO of Wipro, the group. And he was telling me, Ritu, I have stopped hiring engineers now. For my tech roles, I'm actually going and hiring non-engineers science graduate, but I'm not hiring engineers. Because I said, why? He said, because I have issues of adaptability. They are not flexible. So I said, flexible? He said, look, the roles are changing in organizations, but they are not ready to change along with the times. I don't have those challenge with because finally I'm looking for logical thinking. And if I'm getting it, why do I have to hire engineers? So ones who are already in the workforce have to focus on rapid skill enhancement. The rest who are fence sitting, whether I should become an engineer, have to be very clear that no more I can be an engineer to go and work for a tech company, because those routes exist for very limited. And hence, can I become an engineer, let's say, for a manufacturing company, for an automobile company? And are those opportunities existing, and which are those roles? For example, I just did a story on EV engineers. EV engineers are people who comes from electrical background, electronics background, power specialization, and then they are groomed to be EV engineers. At this point of time, the demand far exceeds the supply. I feel future engineers have to qualify these roles which are emerging, where genuine engineering skill sets would be required. And if they think that, yes, this is my aspiration, only then they should go for engineering. Otherwise, it's an absolute waste of time. Absolute waste of time. What has already happened, well, all of you can do is give them options of reskilling and rebadging. That's my view. And I think that's why the mindless approach of parents to pushing kids to medicine or engineering has to really change. That comes through awareness, campaigns, and that's why one of the things that we are working with the government have been always advocating is that change, you have to invest in changing awareness around skills. Like there is a report in the TeamLease website. If you go to the TeamLease resource section where reports are there, vocational versus professional, which actually says, is factual document, which says that the 3-year outcome of a qualified electrician is higher than a regular engineer. Regular engineer, I'm not talking about an IIT or one of the blue chips engineering colleges, but any of the run-of-the-mill, within 3 years, a qualified electrician is getting more than an average engineer. So we have to be very cautious about these professional skill sets today.
You also said that for Goa you took people from Bihar, because I feel the reason being it's very easy to get people from Bihar, right?
Not easy. It's about, I don't know whether, our experience is that skills like electrician, has been for years, for some reason, genetically getting passed on in these two states. So, if you want large scale number of electricians, it's these two states are where you have to go and find. Because look, in any case, it's genetically transferred skill. Not too many kids are opting for learning formally vocational training in the area of electrical, and hence I have to rely on those pockets. But the moment across the country people start opting for the vocational formal training in this area, I will have widespread availability. But right now it is a struggle, by the way. I just can't get. So some of these skill sets, welding, painting, there are pockets in the country where you will find these people. So when you need in volumes, if I want 1 guy, 2 guy, I can find. But if you need in volumes. So I remember one day L&T, the group head HR, told me that if you can give me electrician, welders, painters and plumbers, 1 lakh chahiye. I'll take that. 1 lakh? Where do you get them? We know that there is a dearth. By the way, that's the demand which is there in reality.
But this is from ITI. Their ITI qualified.
But ITI nahi hai kafi. That's what I'm saying. There is not. 1 lakh to kabhi nahi ho payega.
ITI has their own skill development.
Even then, they are falling short. They are not able to. So essentially, some of these businesses can't grow because they don't have these skill sets. Anyone has any other question? And like I said, people have asked me questions like cafeteria mein chicken kam milega and all that also. So there is no class to these questions. You can ask anything.
Are you working on any new policies on education?
Education NALSA. I think the National Apprenticeship Link Online Skilling Curriculum is one such, wherein essentially we are trying to create an academic corridor between apprenticeship program and getting them a degree. So that's going to be one big one for us. The other non-education but has impact on ease of doing business is the unique enterprise number. So any company in India to set up a business has to acquire 25 different numbers or registrations mandatorily. Some state, some comes under the central government. So we are telling the government that, and each has its own set of retail corruption involved in getting it. And that becomes a stumbling block for entrepreneurs to scale. So we are telling the government that use PAN number of a company as the unique enterprise number, and if you have that, it automatically becomes your number, whether it's for PF, whether it's for Sham Shakti Yojana, or whether it is for this tax, that tax. I have that list. Again, if you guys want that pitch note which we made for the government, I'm happy to share it with you. So we just got invited by the PMO, so I went and did a presentation with the PMO and the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Ministry of Finance on UEN. So this is another big one which we are working with the government. Logically, it seems so fine, right? PAN number. The process will be so cumbersome. So I asked him, sir, it's logical, it makes sense. So, no, madam, we have to call for a interministerial state central meeting. So which means that will be a meeting where there will be somebody representing every state coming in, all the central government ministries. I mean, if they are okay, everything becomes then a power battle. While it's logical, like I said, backbone and the brain. Makes sense. But now to get it done is a challenge. But we have, I think, gotten used to it. So we'll know how to figure it out.